Well, week 2 is just about in the books. Only one game remains, the Monday night game. Should be a really good one. Peyton Manning and the Denver Broncos go on the road to face the Atlanta Falcons. Atlanta currently installed as a 3-point favorite in that game on BETDAQ. Hope your Sunday was a profitable one. Mine was nothing spectacular. 2-2 on the picks. Won with Houston and St. Louis. Lost with the New Orleans Saints for the second week in a row. And then really had a disappointing loss in the Sunday night game that just ended here a little while ago. I had the Detroit Lions +7. Lions lost by 8. Not quite good enough. It looked like a loss for most of the game. Detroit actually tacked on a late touchdown to make it as close as 8. And boy, I can't say enough about that San Francisco defense. It has taken the offenses of Green Bay and Detroit in the first 2 weeks and made them look absolutely ordinary. And those are two explosive offenses. The San Francisco 49ers are for real this year. No question about that. Now the headline results for the day, really the surprise of the day was the Arizona Cardinals beating the New England Patriots on the road. Arizona a 13.5-point dog in this game. This puts the Cardinals at 2-0. I mean, nobody had the Cardinals 2-0 at this point of the year. Nearly everybody thought the Cardinals were going to be bad, myself included. Most of the stories about Arizona in the offseason were negative. Most of them had to do with their quarterback situation. John Skelton did not play in this game. He was injured in week 1. Kevin Kolb played pretty well. Arizona only scored 20 points, but it was good enough. Dramatic finish in that game. Ryan Williams, Arizona running back, fumbled the ball. Cardinals were just trying to run out the clock. I mean, New England would have gotten the ball back with less than 30 seconds left, no timeouts, the whole length of the field. But Ryan Williams fumbled. Steven Gostkowski had a chance to win the game, 40 yards or something like this, extremely makeable field goal. Gostkowski pulled the field goal badly. Cardinals did end up, surprise result of the day, winning 20-18 on the road in New England. The other headline of the day involves this New York Giants-Tampa Bay game. It wasn't necessarily the outcome that's making headlines. Now that outcome, the Giants did win 41-34 after being down 2 scores in the fourth quarter. It looked for a long while like Tampa Bay was going to win that game. Really, Tampa Bay was in control nearly the whole time. But what's made headlines here is what happened afterwards between the two coaches. Now, if you weren't watching, with a second left in that game, the game was decided. The Giants had the ball. They were in their victory formation. They were just going to take a knee, and the game was going to be over. Now, Tampa's players knocked the Giants center off the ball, knocked Eli Manning down when the center snapped the ball, which is a little uncharacteristic. What are they going to do? There's 1 second left. Eli should take it and kneel on it. Usually you see players in a situation like that sort of stand up as soon as the ball snapped. But Tom Coughlin took exception to the Bucs' behavior. He went over when the coaches were to shake hands, and they ended up shaking hands, but not before Coughlin had a few words with Schiano. I mean, he was yelling at him. I mean, finger in his face, yelling at him, what's that all about, and this and that. Carried over to the press conference. Tom Coughlin talking about the situation in the press conference, sort of making it sound like Schiano, welcome to the big leagues. This is how it's done up here. Several times made reference to in this league, you don't do this on this level of football. Not a very subtle sort of jab at Greg Schiano. Schiano, of course, the longtime collegiate coach. This is first year as a head coach in the NFL. Schiano was the longtime coach at Rutgers. But to Schiano's credit, he didn't apologize for anything in the press conference. He stood up for himself, defended himself, said he teaches his players to fight until the whistle. There was nothing illegal or dirty about what they did. And he's right. There was nothing illegal. It might have broken some unspoken code amongst the NFL coaches, but Schiano, he made no bones about it. He hasn't been an NFL coach. He spoke. He said at Rutgers we always did that. He said if you watch Rutgers game tape, I'm sure that grinds some NFL coaches to compare their job and their league to Rutgers, lowly Rutgers. But I'm really starting to like Greg Schiano. This guy, I like the way he handled the situation, handled himself in the press conference today. The Bucs, despite losing today, the Bucs seem to be a lot better than they were last year. Impressed with the Bucs through 2 weeks of the season. Think they might win some more games this year. Now, if they are going to win games, they can't let any more quarterbacks throw for 510 yards. Eli Manning throwing for 510 yards in the game today. 8th highest total in NFL history. Only 7 quarterbacks in NFL history have thrown for more than 510 yards in a game. That was obviously the primary reason the Bucs lost the game, and maybe that was a sign that the Giants' offense, which carried them to the Super Bowl victory last year, has awakened. Some other notable results I want to mention here. Indianapolis Colts picking up their first win of the Andrew Luck era, beating the Vikings 23-20 at home. Philadelphia Eagles, in a game we covered extensively here on our live stream in the BETDAQ NFL War Room, which we do every Sunday. Philadelphia won a great game by 1 point over Baltimore. Eagles did not cover in that game. They were a 1-point favorite or a 2.5-point favorite, depending on which BETDAQ market you were using. Also the Steelers. Pittsburgh Steelers, a 27-10 win over the New York Jets. Really threw a bucket of water over all that Jets optimism they had after Week 1, after hanging 48 on Buffalo in Week 1. This looked more like the Jets offense I think a lot of people expected to see. They really struggled. Mark Sanchez really struggled. Tim Tebow hardly played at all. When he did play, he came in. His first play was probably the Jets' best offensive play of the game, a 22-yard run up the middle. But all in all, the Jets offense was shut down by that fierce Steelers defense. Steelers defense showed that they are not old, and maybe that Week 1 result had more to do with Peyton Manning still being himself and the Denver Broncos. You know, they might have a good offense this year. Might have more to do with that than the Pittsburgh Steelers defense possibly aging or fading, which a lot of people had talked about heading into this game. That was sort of some of the talk. Now, some of the talk heading out of this week, the replacement officials. Through Week 1 of the season, no big stink about the replacement refs, no egregious calls. However, the bad officiating sort of was more prevalent in these games today. 3 games in particular really stuck out. Washington, St. Louis, which a game I thoroughly enjoyed watching because I was on the Rams. Rams did come through with the cover in that game after being down 21-6. But Washington, St. Louis, Pittsburgh, and the Jets, bad officiating in that game, and that Philadelphia-Baltimore game. And after the Philadelphia-Baltimore game, Joe Flacco, Baltimore's quarterback, went public saying the replacement officials affect the integrity of the game, so probably get fined for those comments. Roger Goodell doesn't take too kindly for that type of thing, You know, I said earlier today on the live stream, and it's true, you know, I've never, until this current lockout of officials, I've never heard anybody speak so highly of NFL officials. I mean, NFL officiating is notoriously bad. You know, I don't, to be quite honest with you, I haven't noticed that much of a difference through these 2 weeks of the season. I mean, even if the regular officials were officiating the games, there would still probably be a couple of games with some horrible calls, as there are every year. However, the bad officiating was a story coming out of this week's games, this Sunday's games. The other story, I want to talk about 4 teams. 4 teams that clearly, through 2 weeks of the season, have separated themselves as the most disappointing teams in the NFL. I was going through the list of all the teams today, and really, to me, there's no argument. When you talk about which 4 teams have been the most disappointing based on what they were expected to do. All 4 of these teams, 0-2. The Kansas City Chiefs, I want to start with them. After getting plastered at home by the Atlanta Falcons in Week 1, allowing 40 points, didn't get much better for them in Buffalo today. This game was non-competitive. 35-3 at one point. They were down to the Buffalo Bills. I think the final score was 35-17 or something like that. Chiefs tacked on a couple of late touchdowns to make it look more respectable, but the Chiefs, who were 7-9 last year, and they dealt with a lot of injuries last year, won the division the year before last. So I'm sure Chiefs fans, Chiefs management probably thought that in getting some of their injured players back this year, they'd probably improve from last year's 7-9 mark and be more like the team that won the AFC West in 2010. However, things appeared to have gotten a lot worse in Kansas City, particularly on defense. Really don't know what to make of that, but right now, Kansas City Chiefs stand out as one of the big disappointments in the league. Another team, the Tennessee Titans. Tennessee is 0-2, blown out by New England at home, blown out on the road today by San Diego. San Diego won that game 38-10. They started Jake Locker again. Jake Locker had a bad game. Not sure the Titans should be going with Jake Locker right now. I think this is a case of they're going with the young guy who they invested the first-round pick in to see what he can give them, as opposed to the veteran guy, Matt Hasselbeck, who's just clearly better at this point in this stage in their careers. And through 2 games of the Jake Locker era in Tennessee, I really don't know how you argue that Hasselbeck isn't better right now. Because we saw what Hasselbeck did with this exact same Titans team last year. They looked a lot better. That passing game looked a lot better. So the Tennessee Titans through 2 weeks, a definite big disappointment. The Oakland Raiders. The Oakland Raiders lost that Monday night game in Week 1 to San Diego. Could have won that game, hurt themselves with some bad turnovers. Really a tough, inexcusable loss in Miami today. The Dolphins, people, myself included, were wondering coming into this week how the Dolphins were ever going to win a game with that offense. But they handled Oakland today in convincing fashion. I believe they hung 35 points on the Raiders. So the Dennis Allen era in Oakland has not started well. These new-look Raiders, Al Davis is no longer there, obviously. Reggie McKenzie now running the football operations. Dennis Allen, the head coach. They look a lot like the old Oakland Raiders, which is not good. Not the old Oakland Raiders. The old Oakland Raiders like the Oakland Raiders of the last few years. Not good at all. Last team I want to talk about, been a big disappointment. A real disappointment to me personally. This team has cost me money 2 weeks in a row now. That is the New Orleans Saints. I don't think many people predicted New Orleans to be 0-2 at this point of the season. A lot of people now are blaming this on the absence of Sean Payton. Sean Payton, of course, head coach, suspended for the season for his role in the bounty scandal. to me, this looks like it has a lot more to do with the defense. This Saints defense hasn't been very good for the last few years. To say they're not very good right now would be an understatement. This defense has been absolutely bad as any defense in the league throughout their first 2 weeks, just shredded by Robert Griffin and the Washington Redskins in Week 1, and could not stop the Carolina Panthers here today. So the New Orleans Saints at 0-2, a definite big disappointment. Those four teams, Chiefs, Titans, Raiders, and Saints, 0-2, and they appear, it's a pretty bleak outlook for these teams to me for the remainder of the season. Saints obviously have the talent to turn it around. We know that. We've seen it before. These other three teams, particularly the Chiefs and the Titans, I mean, these are two teams that I would think their management and fans, supporters, I would think they would think in the offseason that these two teams were headed in the right direction. The Titans surprising the league, finishing 9-7 last year. Jake Locker starting at quarterback now. They tried to sell that as an improvement over what they had last year in Matt Hasselbeck. The Chiefs, again, we talked about the Chiefs, 7-9 last year, but 2-1 in the 3 games with Romeo Crennel as head coach after Todd Haley was fired. Seemed to play better under Crennel. They got some injured players back this year. A lot of people were expecting more of the Chiefs. Oakland Raiders are the Oakland Raiders, but really these four teams, particularly Kansas City and Tennessee, really stand out to me as clear disappointments at this juncture of the season. Now, Week 2 is not quite over. As I said, Denver at Atlanta on Monday night, which I guess is technically tonight. Atlanta a 3-point favorite in this game on BETDAQ, 51 the total. I lean towards the Atlanta Falcons in this game. I'm going to stay away from the game in terms of betting on it because, listen, I bet against Denver in Week 1, and I've learned my lesson over the years with Peyton Manning. There's few players more frustrating to bet against than Peyton Manning. Peyton's teams have an excellent against-the-spread record throughout his career, and I wasn't sure he was going to be himself. Week 1, I backed Pittsburgh in that game, the Pittsburgh-Denver game in Week 1. But Peyton showed me the hard way, looked just like his old self. They went right through that Pittsburgh defense in the second half. So not making the same mistake this time, even though I don't feel comfortable enough about it to bet on Denver in this game. Denver going across the country to play a Falcons team that looked very good last week and hanging 40 points on the Kansas City Chiefs. And that Denver defense does have some holes in the secondary, so look for Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, Roddy White to hook up for some big plays tonight. Anyway, hope you do enjoy the game tonight. I'm certainly going to enjoy it. As I said, we'll be getting a preview of that game up here in the next few hours on BETDAQ NFL. Until then, I'm John Arnette for BETDAQ NFL.